I don't like the Star Wars sequel trilogy with Rey. And let me explain before you click off of this video because I'm not going to be toxic about it. I'm just going to explain exactly why I don't like it and what I think could be better about them. So, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil. Sorry, from my point of view, it seems like those creating the sequel trilogy just have a basic lack of understanding of how the Star Wars universe actually works. And I see that a lot, especially with the lightsabers. I mean, in episode 9, Kylo Ren literally picks someone up by their waist with his lightsaber blade and slams them into the ground on Mustafar. This doesn't really make sense, and it kind of seems like maybe people aren't really that attached to their lightsabers because Finn kind of just picks it up and uses it like it's just a sword that he found laying on the ground, which granted it kind of is, and I understand that. I understand that argument for it, but I feel like I've always learned that the ancient Jedi viewed these lightsabers as an extension of themselves, and this is also kind of reiterated in a lot of the canon novels, especially ones that I've read about Obi-Wan Kenobi. The next thing I really want to talk about is the story itself. Don't get me wrong, I have no issue with Palpatine coming back, him making clones, all of this really interesting and honestly very terrifying and creepy stuff that is sort of kind of hinted at in the other movies. I feel like you can kind of see this coming just a little bit, but honestly, within the sequel trilogy alone, not including any canon novels, video games, shows, or the old movies, the originals or the prequels, this just kind of comes out of nowhere. And it seems like they were really trying to rely on some nostalgia and a great villain from the past to make the movie relevant. Because let's be honest, The Last Jedi was a total failure and really divided the fandom, which is now why we're seeing the Star Wars community be branded as toxic. And I really hope this video doesn't come off as toxic because it's just my opinion. And I really want to encourage debate, and because honestly, that's just how things get better. You just have to debate about it. But from the very beginning, it had a pretty strong opening. I feel like it was kind of weird that this random person, which we do later find out a little bit about Rey's story, still doesn't quite make sense to me, but that's okay. It starts out really strong with Force Awakens, and I left that movie at the movie theater like, okay, maybe this is gonna be good. Maybe this sequel trilogy is gonna do justice to all of the other 6 movies, and we have a really bright future for Star Wars. When later on, obviously, I don't feel that is the case, but it started out really strong. We had fairly interesting and insane teaser to this giant villain that nobody ever heard of, came out of nowhere, Snoke. Who is this character? He appears in front of Kylo Ren as this giant figure, which I think is a hint towards Palpatine a little bit because Palpatine used to do the same thing to Vader, but they kind of blew him up and really teased him to be the main villain of this new sequel trilogy. And then we got The Last Jedi, and they killed him off basically immediately as soon as he came on screen and we were revealed to him. Very weird. It doesn't make sense to me why they would tease him as this big thing and then kill him off immediately. There was a change in directors, and both directors had a very different vision of how this trilogy was going to play out and end. So that's where the story really splits off. There's no way to possibly argue that they had a clear and direct path with the story. As much as a lot of people hate on the prequels, yes, the writing was that great. It was kind of cringy, but there was always a very clear path. You always could see Anakin starting when he was a young child, leading all the way to the point where he becomes Vader. And granted, it does happen kind of quickly, especially if you don't watch the Clone Wars or read any of the novels or comics. And it happens very, very quickly. But there is that storyline that's always where it was going to go. With the sequel trilogy, they had no idea where it was going to go, to be honest. They were still trying to decide between the two directors on which way they want to take the story, and they were very, very different paths. So once they gave it back to the original director for it, he just kind of had to come up with something that kind of maybe fixed The Last Jedi. Also, another thing on the story that I really don't like is I felt that it was completely unoriginal. If you look at The Force Awakens and compare it to A New Hope, obviously you see the similarities. They've essentially taken the Death Star, made it bigger. That's all it was. It's kind of like that TikTok meme that, oh, I was gonna mess with this. Oh, just make it bigger. That's exactly what they did. They took the Death Star, said, yeah, this thing destroys planets. That's awesome, but only one at a time. What if it was the size of a planet and destroyed multiple planets, could destroy a whole system? Granted, very cool weapon. I think it's awesome. I can kind of see how they would go from the Death Star to that, but it just feels unoriginal. And now they took three people, kind of like how they did Luke, Leia, and Han, but with Rey, Finn, and Poe. They kind of tried to make them that group when they just weren't. I don't think the chemistry was there with the actors, and not their fault at all. I think the writing was just not that good. It just doesn't, just really unoriginal in my opinion. I mean, speaking of unoriginal, look at Kylo Ren. That character is literally a wannabe Vader. That is his whole character, and it makes sense because that is his grandson. So there's actually a connection there, rather than Rey kind of just somehow knowing how to use lightsabers and fly ships, and which she was a scrapper a little bit on her home planet, and maybe she learned a little bit from just kind of toying with those and salvaging parts. So I can see that, I can understand that part a little bit, because this also happens with Anakin, and honestly almost Luke a little bit. I think there's a lot of context missing from the other movies, and maybe there's a lot of context missing from this movie. Who knows? Maybe they'll fill it in and it actually makes sense. I just don't see it. And that kind of brings me to the next part of, I think they ruined the original characters of Star Wars in order to prop up their new ones. So I do want to touch on Han Solo just a little bit, because honestly, Harrison Ford did not like playing Han Solo. They paid him a lot of money to do that, and that's what he did. He's talked about this multiple times in interviews. He doesn't like Star Wars. He doesn't like playing the character. And it doesn't seem like he really likes playing franchise characters, even though that's mostly what he's known for doing. But they do kill off his character. And I think, maybe that's a really meaningful way to do that. It happens in Force Awakens, obviously. Kylo Ren kills his own father, really propelling him towards the path of the Sith, but not quite. There's still a lot of conflict within him. Almost unlike Vader, Vader doesn't really have a lot of conflict within him until he realizes that Luke is actually his son. And he figures that out in a comic. If you haven't read those, I highly recommend reading the Vader series, because he actually finds out in the comic, not in the movies. The character of Kylo Ren is honestly fine with me. I actually really like the character. I think he's interesting, and it's cool to see him try to fill Vader's shoes and kind of take Vader's place in the universe. But he's obviously conflicted, and it's really easy to see that portrayed through the actor and through the story, because pretty much the entire story is about that. The main character I really want to talk about, though, is Luke Skywalker. Obviously, the people that don't like the sequel trilogy pretty much all agree that they ruined Luke Skywalker's character, and I really want to dive into that, because I feel like a lot of you sequel fans and people who say, no, they didn't ruin the character, this is just how he ended up after X amount of time, I feel like we never really explain our position as to why. So let me explain a little bit. In the original trilogy, Luke's entire arc is essentially to save his father. And also, beyond that, learn from the Jedi's mistakes previously. Obviously, in the prequel trilogy, we see the Jedi are overconfident. They are arrogant, almost, and they believe they're untouchable, essentially. They think the Sith are gone. They think they wiped them out. They think there's balance in the Force, whatever it may be. And they just kind of sit there, and then they're used as political pawns. They don't even catch Lord Sidious right under their nose as Emperor Palpatine. They serve him. They fight for him. And they fight for the Republic, which they don't know is going to eventually turn into the Empire. Luke's entire character was to learn from that, and also take and save his father, Anakin Skywalker. So by the end of Return of the Jedi, it seems like Luke has done that. It seems like he's he's kind of learned that maybe attachments aren't that bad of a thing. He knows that that's probably what sent his father over the edge. He knows his mother died. He knows that Anakin somewhere deep down is a good person, and he's still alive inside of Darth Vader's body. It is honestly Luke's attachment to his father, Anakin Skywalker, that helps him save the day. This isn't even to mention that Luke never gave up on Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker. Darth Vader has killed countless people. Countless people. He's oppressed many different races. He's destroyed entire civilizations. He's so unbelievably ruthless. He will kill someone just for seeing his face or entering his chambers. And Luke Skywalker never gave up on this individual. But somehow we're supposed to believe that he's went from that to never giving up on a character who's tried to destroy a countless number of people and civilizations and species, to I had a bad dream about my nephew possibly turning to the dark side, so I need to kill him in his sleep. Now, I know the common response to that is, oh, he wasn't going to. He realized he messed up. Yes, he did realize he messed up, but it was too late at that point. In my opinion, however, the character of Luke Skywalker never would have gotten to the point of messing up. It is of my opinion, and I would guess a lot of other people's opinions who don't like the sequels, that Luke would have approached Ben about his confliction inside and talked to him about it and really figured out what was going on. I think, honestly, a simple, hey, I had a bad dream. Are you thinking about turning to the dark side? I think that would have sufficed. And he would have been like, yeah, I kind of am. And then Luke would have been like, yeah, let's not do that. Boom, sequel trilogy over. It's over. But that didn't happen, obviously. And I've come to terms with it. I really have. It just doesn't make sense to me still. Something else about the character of Luke Skywalker that really doesn't make sense is him running away and hiding when, honestly, there wasn't really a need to. It doesn't make sense for him to run and hide. Yes, his entire order was destroyed, but he did know who did it, and he obviously could have taken out Ben. Maybe he didn't want to, but he definitely could have. Another typical response I get whenever I say something like this is, oh, Yoda did it. This is extremely different because there were two Lords of the Sith. You had Vader, who at the time maybe was injured because of Obi-Wan on Mustafar, but he was still there. Also, Yoda already lost to Palpatine. He tried to stop him and failed. He had to leave. If Yoda would have stayed, he would not have been on Dagobah to train Luke to go fight Vader and the Emperor. This is a very different situation. You got to remember that the Jedi were all just across the galaxy. There were thousands of Jedi. And in an instant, the clones that they had been serving with in a fight against the Separatists, they just instantly turned on him in a moment. And he had to kill some of his friends. You got to remember that the Jedi viewed the clones as people, unlike the Emperor and a lot of people in the Republic, viewed them as people and made friendships with them, even called them by their names rather than just whatever clone number they were. One character I do want to say I'm actually pretty happy with the way she was portrayed is Princess Leia. I think she was awesome. I think she was really, really cool. I think the novel explains pretty well why she wasn't in control of the New Republic anymore. And that just comes down to simple politics. Her father was Darth Vader. People didn't like that. So they kind of voted her out. And that's just the way democracy goes. Sometimes it becomes really corrupt, and that's okay. Within the Star Wars universe, it really made sense, and I like the way that she was portrayed, and she was going to become a Jedi until she realized that her son is going to do these horrible things. That part is a little confusing, because I figured she would want to save her son and continue her training. I would have liked to see her actually be a Jedi on screen and really fight for her child along with Luke. I think Luke and Leia wielding lightsabers to go save Ben, so good. That would have been so good, but that's not what we got in the end. I honestly believe they did this to these original characters that we all know and love just in order to prop up their new characters, to try to make us care about them and root for them in the end. But honestly, I didn't care if Rey or Finn or Poe or if any of them survived. I really like Finn quite a bit, but they ruined his story mostly because I believe Disney wanted to be able to release release their movies in China and make a lot of money. That's just the way it goes. Now, my final issue, not really an issue, but I think what could have made the sequels so much better is not ignoring Legends and actually using some of the characters in their own different ways. But Disney didn't really want to do that. They wanted to make completely new characters, completely make up their own stories. And I get it from a creative standpoint, but at the same time, they kind of didn't do that because all of their characters were just kind of knockoffs of original characters. So some characters that I think they could have incorporated a little bit are Han and Leia's children from Legends. They're awesome. They have twins, and another child that are just really, really interesting characters, and they're all so different from each other. I love it. I think using them would have been really cool, but I'm okay with what they did, making Ben as their child and him turning to the dark side. I think that's really interesting. I think it's a potentially good story. I think it just fell short. One character that I really wish they would not have ignored, which completely changes Luke's story, by the way, even if they were to introduce her now, I still couldn't see the connection from Return of the Jedi Luke to whatever that garbage was that we got, is Mara Jade. Obviously, one of Vader's assassins that he sends to kill Luke, and Luke ends up falling in love with her and building that connection and getting married. This character would be very interesting to see played out on screen, but even now, I don't think that's going to happen. Mark Hamill has said that he thinks Luke Skywalker's stories are done, which I greatly disagree with. I think we'll always need Luke Skywalker. Along with ignoring all of these characters, they also ignore some insane powers. Like, the abilities that Luke reaches in Legends are just unreal. Same with Vader and Palpatine. Like, Palpatine can literally create black holes in space, and Luke can move them using the Force. That's just unreal. And I would honestly love to see that. I would love to see Luke have not Sith lightning, but the Jedi lightning. It would be a wonderful day if I could see Luke walk in with lightning everywhere and just throwing. Oh man, we got a little taste of that in The Mandalorian season 2, and I really hope they continue using Luke. They've obviously cast someone to play him as a body double, with Mark Hamill still kind of doing the voice. But the guy they cast to play Han, he actually kind of crushed the role. Chewbacca, obviously, we can still have someone play Chewbacca. And Leia, they used her daughter to play her. They could continue to do that. And she looked great in the part. You could barely even tell that was her daughter, Carrie Fisher's daughter. She crushed the role. She did really, really well. And then, obviously, that body double for Luke. He looks just like him if you guys haven't seen him. I don't know how he sounds, but we can kind of get past a little bit of difference in the voices. Honestly, those are the reasons that I do not like the sequel trilogy. I am a fan of Star Wars, and I love Star Wars through and through. I've read pretty much every comic and novel and played every game that is canon to the Star Wars universe, and some things that aren't canon, obviously, as I talk about Legends here on this video. But if you do like them, please let me know why you like them. What's the response to some of the points I brought up, and how does Luke go from Return of the Jedi to The Last Jedi and just, in my opinion, ruin the character? Please let me know what you all think. I hope you enjoyed this video, and make sure you subscribe for a lot more videos like this.